Deanna here. Thanks so much for being here. Today's video is a book review. Today's book is One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston. One Last Stop is about main character August, who has recently moved to New York and has to take the Q train to get back and forth to work and school and things like that. One day she is traveling and wouldn't you know it, she finds herself ruining the outfit that she is wearing. So step in mysterious subway girl to the rescue. Subway girl helps Autumn and there is a bit of a spark and a connection between them. And we find out that Subway Girl, that name is very fitting for her because she is stuck on the subway. She's unable to leave and she's actually from 1970s. So right there, that is quite the mystery that Autumn has to unravel and try to figure out what's going on. Why is Jane trapped on this subway? And how is she the same age as August and yet they are from two different time periods? So this is definitely a love story that is between August and Jane. And it's also a bit of some romance and there is a bit of mystery going on, a little bit of high stakes happening. What has happened to Jane to have her trapped on this subway? So my thoughts on this book is that I actually really enjoyed this book. I found it a fun read. It was pretty interesting and I found it kind of in the realm of like your beach read almost. Like it's not anything super hard to read. It's kind of light and breezy, a lot of dialogue, a bit of an easy read, but it's also a pretty big, thick read too. I mean, this is almost 400 pages, which is about 120 something thousand words. So there's a lot in here. And with that, while the story is fun and it's interesting and you're trying to figure out what's going on with Jane and how is August going to figure this out, sometimes it was a little dragging. Like sometimes I did feel like there was a kind of a lot going on that maybe potentially could have been edited. That's just my own opinion. I mean, this is my review. When I ordered this book, I didn't think it was going to be as large as it was, so I was a bit surprised on how big it is. And sometimes that did make it a little more difficult to read sometimes, because there were times when I felt that maybe, even though it was really like a lot of dialogue and it was a quote-unquote easy read, sometimes it was just a little bit off on the pacing, and I did sometimes feel like sometimes I was like, wow, there's still more going on, there's still more that's gonna happen, like look how far away I am. Like sometimes when you're reading a book you get to a point where you're like, oh my god, there's only this much left and the things that have to happen can't happen in that amount of time, whereas this one I had like this much left and I was just like, wow, there's still a lot to happen. So it definitely was a bit of a bigger read in comparison to some of maybe what I have read in this kind of category. Romances can be a bit longer, so maybe I just wasn't really paying that much attention, but I think it was just sometimes like there was some filler stuff almost, or sometimes stuff like you almost didn't really need it to really push the story along, because a lot of times when you're editing and writing stories, you want to make sure that your scenes and what's happening in the book is really relevant to your story and pushing your story along, and is really relevant to your character develop. And while yes, it did give us some backstory of the characters and it kind of helped us maybe connect a bit with the characters sometimes it almost felt like it was too much. Sometimes it was like, okay, I get it, you know, Jane can't eat or this or that. Like it was just sometimes like there's almost too much happening in the book. That just was an interesting choice on the author. So that was kind of my takeaway in this. Other than that, I did really enjoy the story. I was really drawn to this too because it is an LGBTQ kind of story, and I wanted to expand my reading library and branch out into those types of stories because they're valid and they're ones that should be read. So I definitely wanted to have this part of my library and see what it's like. And it was really fun in a lot of ways. It was a nice read. It was something that I did reach for a lot. It took me a while to finish it, but it was one I did keep going back to and going, oh, how's Jane and August going on? Like, what's happening with them? And there was a couple points where I couldn't put it down. There was a couple points when it was like, okay, what is happening now? What's going on? The stakes are gotten a little bit higher. How are we getting out of this? But again, even when we realized what was happening, and there was so many like other little subplots going on, so much happening with this story. Yes, it all tied together and you saw where it all connected and everything, but it was almost like, oh my goodness, they have to get this done and this done and this done and then do this. And then it just was like, I felt more urgent sometimes than almost what I felt our main character felt. Like I was almost like, come on, August, like, how are you gonna figure this out? You gotta do something. So that was interesting but I think that was the character of August. She has a lot of self-doubt. She has a lot of essentially insecurities and just things that she has to work on. So you do see that happen through her character arc. You do see her become a bit more accepting of herself and what she enjoys and who she is and who she loves, essentially. So you do see that as well, but sometimes it was like the relationship between them, I just wanted like, come on, you guys obviously like each other, stop dragging it out. Maybe that was better than maybe some people would argue that, hey, well, at least they didn't just like fall in love in like 2 seconds, like they went through the whole story together, and that's beautiful too. It's just, it was in a book when you have so much to read and get through and have this whole story happen. It is a bit of a balancing act, and it is a bit of definitely a technique that has to be done to make sure that your readers are engaged and really loving your story while also giving your readers time to reflect on what's happening, but also keep them engaged and keep them reading. So it's definitely an interesting balancing act. So in regards to our characters, I absolutely adored Jane. I loved her. I wanted to like snatch her up and like just keep her safe, and just she was amazing. August sometimes was a little frustrating. I didn't not like her, but I didn't absolutely love her. Like I kind of gravitated more towards Jane. Jane was kind of kick-ass and cool, and yeah, she had a little bit of vulnerabilities that peeked through too sometimes. I mean, she is a woman trapped on a train. She's gonna have some issues, but August sometimes almost wasn't as relatable or something. I don't know what it was about August. Maybe she hit a little too close to home. I don't know. I just know sometimes I was like, August, you're exhausting. But maybe that's also, I mean, it's a little hard putting yourself out there. She had to be the one to kind of step forward and be like, hey, Jane, I like you. And that's a little tough, putting yourself out there and being vulnerable, especially when you're doing it to like a potential ghost or something. So yes, there's definitely some understanding of why maybe August wasn't as bold, and that just wasn't her character as well. Jane was a bit more bold than August, but sometimes August was almost a little too meek in ways, or just not as likable as Jane. Maybe putting August against Jane was just not fair to August because Jane was just so cool. I also loved the roommates as well, especially Mila and Nico. I just found them fun. They were pretty cool. Like they were nice kind of support system for August. They were definitely a really cool second family for her. Sometimes perhaps it was a little too much going on, but again, like I think it was better than maybe having them two-dimensional. So it's a balance again. So I think what we did see of them, they were really cool. And honestly, I just loved the representation in the book. I found myself learning a lot too, so that when I was reading some, especially since Jane is from the 1970s, so when I was reading some of what Jane was going through, or what kind of like things she was having happening, she's like an activist back in her day. She was a bit of like getting in there, getting in and putting her voice out there. So the actual events that are mentioned in the book, I took to Google and went and even looked them up and went, oh wow, that actually happened, or oh wow, who is that person? So it was kind of cool to like send me a bit of a history of LGBT and some of the things that they have gone through and how it's impacted people and the world, especially since this is in the US, definitely how it's impacted the US. So that was something definitely interesting to learn more about with this as well. And also in these books, there's like these little blurbs at the start of every chapter. So there's like little blurbs at the start of every chapter, and I just found that pretty cute. It was a nice little way to kind of see some of how Jane has impacted some of maybe the other people that have been on the train that she's on, and also just a little bit of her story too. It was nice little glimpses into Jane's life a lot too, because there was just little bulletins or newspaper articles or things like that that are at the start of each chapter, and that was really fun to kind of read those every chapter. It also gave me a little bit of nostalgia because it reminded me of another book series that I read where the start of it was like an IM copy, like instant messages going back and forth. Cannot remember the series. I just remember it was about like 4 high school girls, and I read it back when I was probably in high school. It was just a fun little read, and it kind of just reminded me of that. So it was fun to see those little quick glimpses at the start of every chapter. So overall, my thoughts on this book is that it was a good book. It was really fun. It's a fun, light read with a really important message woven throughout it about acceptance and love. So I definitely do recommend it. I gave it a 4 out of 5 on my blog. I did blog about it, so if you want to check it out, I'll put the link below. Other than that, I want to know your thoughts. Have you read One Last Stop? What did you think? Have you read any more of Casey McQuiston's books? Apologize if I'm saying that name really wrong. But have you read any other of her books, and what do you think? I'd love to hear it below. If you liked this video, give it a thumbs up. I really appreciate it. I love hearing from you. Go ahead, engage down below, subscribe, all that fun stuff. I love it. Thank you so much for being here. I hope wherever you are having a wonderful day, night, or evening, whatever time it is, or wherever you are in the world. Thank you so much for being here. Take care of yourselves, and you will see me next time.